So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel and I are partners on Expat International School. But beyond that, Mikkel is an amazing entrepreneur and he's got an amazing story. I met him, a year ago or so when he
It's almost two. Yeah.
almost two. Yeah, when he interviewed me on his expat radio show or podcast. I guess I still think radio. Uh, Shows how old I am. But we discovered we had a lot in common, and I'm especially fascinated by his personal story as it applies to education. So his title says it all: from high school dropout to millionaire, why traditional education will never make you rich. But this is for all of those who may have children who are not fitting into the system, and it's huge validation. You should not let the system validate your child or your feelings about your child. Mikkel is a wonderful story of carve your own way and do better than you would have done with the system. So, Mikkel, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate it. And yeah, my presentation is going to be probably a little bit different than a lot of the other speakers that you've heard this week. I want to tell you kind of a bit about my personal story. But first, I'm really, really excited about this opportunity. I think this is a great organization. I love what they stand for, and I'm so happy to be involved with everything. So when I was a child, I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability. And what happened was I was in grade 3, and the teacher pulled me out of class one day, and they took me to a little room, and they sat me down, and the teacher was there, and the principal and the resource teacher, and maybe the vice principal, I can't remember. And they sat me down, and they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is we want to send you to a special school for special boys. So that's what they did. Every day for 3 years, I got on a little white bus, and I took a little white bus across town, and I went to this quote unquote special school. The only problem was that it actually was not a special school. It was a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got picked on, I got bullied, I got in tons of fights. I think I had my nose broken a couple of times. It was not a good experience by any means. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikkel type of story. I gave as good as I got. I got hit, I hit back. I'm not going to claim other than that. But I went to this special school for 3 years, and it was a horrendous experience. It was literally the worst thing that I ever went through. And I used to come home from school every day, absolutely bawling my eyes out and crying. And I was really upset. It was a horrible experience. Now, after my 3 years, I actually got to go back to my neighborhood school. And I thought, wow, I am so lucky. I am so fortunate. Everybody will have been missing me so much. They'll be so excited to hear from me. Where's Mikkel been? And, I get to see all of my friends. And I thought, this is excellent. Well, once again, you can probably imagine what happened. I went back to my neighborhood school, and, first day, first week of school, everybody started, gossiping and whispering, oh, I remember him. He went to some retard school. 1980s, totally politically correct. You know how kids are. Very, very sensitive individuals, of course. But school didn't really get any better for me. And I started failing. And then they sent me to summer school. And then I failed summer school. And somehow I squeaked into the next year, and it was all over again. And I got into high school for first year of high school, and it just continued. I failed almost every class. I stopped going. And fast forward, I stopped going to school at 12 years old, and I officially dropped out at 15. Now, when this happened, my parents were not exactly, supportive. This was not something like they were encouraging me to do. You have to think this was almost 30 years ago now. So leaving school at an early age was not something that most people do. But I knew that the situation was wrong. I knew that it did not work for me. And I took responsibility myself as a 12-year-old to leave school. After this, fast forward a little bit, and I started traveling. And I started traveling internationally as a teenager, solo travel. And I've had an opportunity now to visit over 100 countries, 107, 108 different countries. I've lived in 9 different countries, and I've circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. I started traveling and I started meeting these incredible people. And I really realized that there's not only one way to learn something, only one way to go about building your life or a business or be successful in a career. For me, traditional education was not that path. It was the exact opposite. Side note, my quote unquote learning disability is a form of dyslexia, which I think is quite funny now, considering I'm a professional author and I write and speak for a living. But as a child, they would really make me feel that something was inherently wrong with you. So I want you to kind of imagine a child being told that there's something wrong with their brain, and what I heard is you are stupid. That is more or less what I understood. Now, I did go out and I had the school board or my parents had me tested and for IQ, and I have an extremely high IQ. So even though on grades they would tell you, or on paper they would tell you, actually you're highly intelligent, my entire life I heard I'm stupid because I couldn't read and write as a child when everyone else could. The damage that this did to me as a child took many, many years to get over. But luckily, I had found traveling. I'm not sure what life would be like if I hadn't found traveling, and I hadn't found it at such a young age. It's kind of a hard thing still to talk about sometimes. I'm certainly over it. If anything, I'm actually probably proud of my story at this point, because I had the courage to stand up and say that things are wrong. But when I still think back on what it was like through those types of experiences, and to be looked at in a different way from your family and your friends and society as a whole, who tell you if you don't finish school and go on to college or university, that you're never going to make anything of your life. You're never going to be successful, and happiness falls back on success, or so we are taught. It's a challenging thing to go through. Now, I would like to think, quite successful now. I run a company where I help Americans and Canadians, technically people from anywhere in the world, but in practical sense, mostly Americans and Canadians, to move overseas. So we help a lot with the tax structures. We help a lot with the immigration work. And I learned how to do all of these things by actually testing them myself, by traveling, by being the guinea pig and working through it. And also through a lot of mentorship, a lot of trial and error, working with other professionals in the space. It's actually one of the reasons that I went out there and I started Expat International School with my friend Mikkel Strong, was because we saw that this was a problem. And as an entrepreneur, my main job is to solve problems. So I'm always looking at things in a very different lens, a lens that I don't think is taught in traditional education. That idea of critical thinking and personal responsibility, of learning things that are just not memorization and rote, learning things with your own 2 hands and creating and building something, actually having your own money on the line, and actually having risk involved in everything that you do. Mentorship, it's one of the main things that Mikkel and I align very well on, is mentoring. I'm very fortunate to be part of the school, and I have a young mentee, and I hope to have more in the future and be able to give back in other ways. Those were never things that were ever offered to me as a child. I had to go out there and find solutions and figure this all out on my own. I also think that as an adult, now I can look back and say a lot of my creativity was not beat out of me as a child because school didn't work for me. Because I left so early, I still have a wonder and an awe for the world. I still look around and I'm trying to figure things out and piece things together. I have friends of mine who went to university, maybe even went on and did a master's afterwards, but since then have never picked up another book in their entire lives. And then you have someone like me, high school dropout, dyslexic, and I read on average over 100 books a year and have done so for more than 20 years straight. I have literally an entire library that I've traveled around the world with that I read on, I refer back to. It's that buildup of knowledge, which traditional education doesn't really, it doesn't teach you to love learning or how to self-learn or take responsibility for any of these things. Anyways, a lot of these things that I'm trying to describe to you right now are really what has helped make me so successful as an entrepreneur. So at the end of the day, I'm actually very grateful to public education because I came out on the other end with a lot of grit and a lot of determination. But I wouldn't say that I'm the norm in that situation. I think that for most people who would go through a situation like I would let it actually ruin their lives. I think that we see a lot of problems with depression or drug abuse or other destructive behaviors because of these false belief patterns like I had when I was a child, that you're broken, that you're stupid, that you're not worth something. My business right now is kind of a reflection of my personality on what I tried to create, what I was interested in, how I view the world. That goes for my main business, Expat Money, which is the consulting firm, or Expat International School. Trying to take all of these things that I've learned through my life and share them in a new way for people. I think that you'll probably hear a lot of presentations and probably presentations from Mikkel this week talking about his methodology for Socratic thought and the conversations. It's quite interesting because I've sat in on a lot of the classes and I've seen the reaction of the students. And it's just so polar opposite from what I remember from school. So much so that it doesn't even really resemble school. And school is probably not even the best word for it. I would encourage anybody who is interested in this type of methodology or learning more about us to reach out to Mikkel or I, to see if this is a good fit for your family. Because there are other options out there. And I would say if your child is having trouble in school like I did, then you don't just have to push them through it and go through. There's actually probably better ways to success. So that's a little bit about my story. I'm very happy to open it up for Q&A or Mikkel, if you want to discuss anything or we want to get into any of the nitty-gritty details. But that's just kind of a breakdown.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Mikkel. Does anybody have any questions? Maybe we can, before kind of, well, actually, a good way to approach it is, I think often people who hear learning differences believe that, somehow that means that one is not capable. And you went over it a little bit, but maybe you could talk both about how learning differences work in Expat International School and how learning differences in no way inhibit your ability to be a great entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to tackle the second part first. And I kind of did touch on it a little bit. I truly believe that an entrepreneur's role is to solve problems. Now, if you're able to look at the world in a solution-minded mindset, where you're always out there trying to figure out how you can help people, if you go into the world and you go forwards with that idea in your head, you can do some incredible things. And I think that this is one of the things that we actually highlight a lot in the school, because the full name of the school is Expat International School of Freedom and Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the greatest gift to humanity. Someone who can go out there and help others in an economically viable way, I think is something that should be celebrated. And it once was extremely celebrated all over the world. And I would like to see it more so. Everything that we have in this world comes down to entrepreneurs building and creating something. Someone took a risk and they had an idea and they tested it out. That's the first thing that I would like to say. The other methodology for the education in the school is obviously Socratic, which, Mikkel, you literally wrote the book on Socratic multiple times. So, I would definitely encourage anybody to pick up your books. I think that it's really interesting because when we first started speaking, I told you that I was a big proponent of homeschooling and world schooling and unschooling. You're like, Mikkel, you can think about this as homeschooling by professionals. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, that really speaks to me so much. And I think that we've taken so many different aspects of the best of education and how kids learn and put them together in one place. You know, most of our teachers, we don't even call them teachers, we call them guides, probably don't have a traditional background in learning teaching. They didn't go to teachers college. A lot of them were entrepreneurs, built something themselves. They're mostly have real life experience. So it's where the information is coming from, how it's presented, not memorization, not based on standardized testing, more mentorship, more discussion of ideas. I think that this is all really valuable things on how to train your brain to work and to think critically and eventually build a business of your own.
Marvelous, marvelous. Kanan is asking, where are some of your favorite places to road school?
So we have taken our children. I have two children. I have a 5-year-old, almost 6-year-old, and a brand new baby. Well, not brand new, 11 months old baby. My daughter has been to 15 countries already. So we've taken her to Egypt with us. We took her to Hong Kong and Macau. My wife is from mainland China, so we've taken her back to China a dozen times. Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, tons and tons of places all over the world. Now, we kind of think of things as always an opportunity to teach our kids, always a learning opportunity. We're not so stringent on setting exact times for anything, but all of these countries have actually been excellent learning opportunities for her. Whether that be, seeing a new place, tasting the food, experiencing culture, or something as simple as just going out to the playground and being like, here, go play with strangers, go talk to other kids. My daughter speaks Mandarin, Chinese, English, and Spanish all at native level, and she speaks Russian at a basic or intermediate level. We do 2 hours of Russian lessons with her a day, and she takes piano lessons all in Russian as well. So those are kind of opportunities that you can have when you take your family overseas. Now, my son's almost only 11 months old, so we're still working on language number one, but we'll definitely pursue a lot of the same type of things in that field.
Well, we're waiting for other questions. Why do you think that more parents don't realize their child's well-being is being damaged in many special education programs? I actually, I think this is way more common than people realize. And you're almost unique in realizing for yourself that it was not healthy. Why do you think people accept this?
There's a couple of reasons. I would say one of the main ones is that you're really taught to be a victim throughout it. And I want that to really come across very, very strong in my story. And right now, I am not a victim at all. That's why I said I got beat up for sure. But I wasn't a victim. I mean, I spoke up, I stood my ground, and I fought back. I think that being a victim is unbelievably damaging because what it does is it shows you that you don't have control over your own life. And anytime that you are segregated or pushed out and said that there's something different with you, then that type of behavior or that type of mindset really comes to the forefront. I don't think of myself as a victim at all. I am proud of what happened to me and how I stood up. I think that's the number one thing. I mean, actually, I'll give you another example of this. When I was in school, I was told I had so much trouble with English that we would not put you in French classes. I'm from Southwestern Ontario. I'm a Canadian citizen. So everybody else in school took French except for Mikkel. I never took a French class. And so I grew up thinking that I would never be able to learn a foreign language. Well, now I've lived overseas in 9 different countries and I speak fluent Spanish and I'm basically self-taught. I just had to find methodologies that would work for me. I had to be in tune of what would work and what would not work. For example, I do very well with audio, hence why I have a podcast. even I read 100 books a year, probably only 50 of them are physical books. And I do Audible for half of the books. For me, that is still reading, but I'm speaking to my strengths as the way that I learn. I don't think that in traditional education, they spend a lot of time trying to identify and help people figure out the best methodology. There's one way, and that's it. And if you don't fit the box, then there's something wrong with you.
Thank you. We have another question. What do you think of college for kids these days?
All right. I have multiple opinions about this. I think that if you want to go out into the world and you want to make money, if you want to build a business, if you want to be an entrepreneur, college and university is probably a terrible path for you. If you want to be an engineer or a dentist or a doctor, then yes, absolutely. I 100% think that that is the path to go. Personally, I do not want a dentist putting his fingers in my mouth who's never been trained and never gone to school for these types of things. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to build a business, if you want to help people, no, I think that there are better paths forwards. I think mentorship, internship, take the money that was going to be spent on there, try something, fail and burn, crash and burn the business. All of these have learning experiences. Even, if you have slated money for your kids to go to university, take a portion of that and send them on an around the world trip. The world is a very big place. There is a lot of things out there, a lot of places to explore. 193 countries in the world. The majority of them are very, very safe, very free. That's a real education. I would much rather see things like that than the same path that everybody else is doing. Does that make sense?
Certainly makes sense to me.
Anne says, yes, exclamation. I love that. Laura says, amen to travel for a real education. Definitely. Travel is my education. Yes, I dropped out of school when I was 12 years old, but with 22 years of solid travel, solid travel, like nonstop, around the clock. For 22 years, I've been living in different countries and traveling. I've met so many incredible people around the world and put in so many unique situations that has really made me grow as a human being. For me, that's education.
After you left school, did you ever take any conventional courses? Did you ever sign up for a course here or there?
I did go back to do like online programs, like the free university programs. Like, for example, can't remember what it was. I think it was a Harvard law program. I went back and did that, but that's not an accredited program. I just kind of sat in on all of the videos and the lectures just because I was kind of curious about these things because I deal literally daily. All I'm doing is speaking to clients or speaking to clients and lawyers. It's one of the main things that I do. So I wanted to understand a lot from the perspective and have a
So would you say you discovered how to be an autodidact, or you were a natural autodidact, or how did you learn how to learn on your own?
Yeah, I think that I describe myself as an autodidact polymath. I have a huge amount of interests around the world. There's just so many things that I'm so curious about. Now, the learning and the autodidact side, I think I just was always so curious, and I never had a pain point or a pain association with study and with like work. Like for me, reading and studying, that is what I do on my downtime. I love to read now. I read 3 hours every night before bed, almost every single night. If I don't have a client dinner, I'm reading a book. And sometimes, my son gets me up at about 5 a.m. now. The rest of the house is at about 7 a.m. So the last couple months, I've been getting up and doing an hour or two of reading in the morning as well. I've just had to figure out different ways that work for me on learning, what sticks with me, what doesn't stick. I've actually studied a ton of books and literature and courses on learning how to learn. There's an excellent course on Coursera, and I think that's the actual title for it. I think I just plagiarized it, Learning How to Learn, by Barbara Oakley, if memory serves me correctly. And she does a fantastic job. I remember going through that diligently 8 years ago or 7 years ago or something like that, and really getting a ton out of that. I've probably read 100 books on how to learn, how to process information, how the brain works, habits, all of these types of things that will set you up for success. I even did an entire podcast episode on it last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe. And it was called The 93 Things That I Do in My Life to Set Myself Up for Success. It was 2.5 hours I sat down and presented on this. But it really goes through all of the things on how I function as an autodidact.
Very cool. And Laura asks, what do you think of seeking accreditation for non-traditional schools?
Well, Michael, you and I, we run a school together and we have an accredited and non-accredited program. You and I have spoken off the mic. We actually both prefer the non-accredited program. It allows a lot more freedom for the kids to kind of explore the things that are really interesting to them. And we can tailor make things a lot more. Now, we offer an accredited program because by request, some parents want that. But personally, I think that the non-accredited programs that we do are way more valuable. I think it's a better way to go, personally.
And, just to put some more flesh on that, one of the problems with the accredited programs is they force people back into the school box. And so, it's nice to give people a trade-off because not everybody's comfortable out of the school box, but the school box is a box.
Yeah. And, we don't pretend to know what is the best for every single family out there or assume that everybody has to follow exactly what we want. We have methodologies, we've seen things that have worked, but the programs that we design are custom based on that child's needs, on the family's wishes and on the child's needs. I think that that's a more holistic way to look at education.
Yeah, Laura replies, that's my thought as well. My school is accredited, but I want to start a non-accredited arm. Our accreditation is thankfully very flexible and accommodating. Mm-hmm. But I love, Laura, that you want to start a non-accredited arm, even with a flexible accreditation. It's nice to have complete freedom. Just the way I think about it is I always want to do what's right for the child, and sometimes the boxes of school don't allow you to do what's right for the child. And the tighter the boxes, the more children are not served by those boxes.
Standardized testing, I think, is one of the worst things in the world. I failed every single test I think I ever took in school, but I have 147 IQ and I built my life from scratch on my own. And side note, my family was not wealthy. I did all of this 100% on my own. I have a loving family who's very supportive, but financially that just was not an option whatsoever. I created everything with my own two hands and with my mind. So standardized testing doesn't really tell you anything, I would say. It tells you how good they are at memorizing and forgetting one certain piece of information that will probably never be relevant in real life, but it doesn't teach them how to think, how to solve problems, how to help people.
I would add that it often gives people, both parents and students, and even teachers, a false understanding of who somebody is. And insofar as parents, students, and teachers are slaves to the tests, then they really damage children by believing negative things about them that are simply false.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Well, great. Well, it is great to have you. As I mentioned, now we're going to go into breakout sessions, and one of the breakout sessions will be myself interviewing Mikkel Thorup and Lacey Price, our very own Lacey, who has a different, but in some ways analogous story to Mikkel. Again, I've known hundreds of people who did not succeed in school, who've had fantastic lives. And as Mikkel said, in many cases, they're entrepreneurs. There's a huge connection between entrepreneurship and not working with school. Entrepreneurship is about being out of the box. School is about being in the box.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing that I will say is that I am very fortunate. I love my life. I've built my own business. I've created my life exactly how I want. I have an amazing family, and I've gotten to do the thing that I wanted to do more than anything in the world, which is travel extensively. And I've been able to do that because I'm a high school dropout. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
Love it, Mikkel. All right. See people over in the breakouts. Bye-bye.
Nice one. Thanks, everyone.